Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today. You have joined us for the Q3 2021 College of Arts and Sciences Colloquium titled High Impact Practices, the Magic Pill for Increasing Student Engagement, Retention, and Completion. We are excited to have Drs. Mingjian Bao, Dr. Tricia Lauer, and Dr. Newton Miller presenting today. Dr. Mingjian Bao is an Associate Director and Professor in the Academic Engagement Center. Dr. Tricia Lauer is the Associate Vice President of Learning Assessment for the University of Arizona Global Campus. And Dr. Miller is a lead faculty in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts. During today's presentation, you may post questions in the chat, and we will use them to facilitate a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Also, please keep an eye on the chat towards the end of the presentation for a link to an important follow-up survey and a certificate of attendance. Again, welcome all, and let's get started.
Outstanding, outstanding. So I guess everyone, welcome to our colloquium for this this cycle here. We wanted to kind of let everyone know about these wonderful things that have been around for a while called HIPs, or high impact practices. So I think in the last colloquium, I believe it was, Dr. Koo, one of the originators of this whole idea, gave us a brief overview and did a question and answer for us. So now what we're here to do is to kind of add, I guess, a little more substance behind it, and to kind of invite you for some things. I don't want to get ahead of the game, but Dr. Bowles, she's going to tell us some things that you can do to actually activate some of these HIPs into your programs. So for time's sake, I'm just going to tell you really quickly what a HIP is. So really, it is like the fundamental metric. It is the thing, the measure, since as far back as 2014 or so, that shows that an institution is dedicated to student success, or whether it's through campus culture or through educational practices. And they come in about 11, well, not about, there's 11 categories of HIPs. So I call them categories because as time has evolved, as educators, we've gotten really innovative, and we can take these categories and we can create interventions within those categories that all kind of that match up and, you know, fall within each of the titles. So those 11 categories are listed on this slide here. So I'm not going to like go through each of them, but I am going to pick out and let you know that here at UAGC right now, we actively have first year experiences. We're working on some learning community things, writing intensive courses, you know, are within our curriculum across the board in all of our colleges. We all have culminating capstones in our projects. E-portfolios are in use, and there's some use of diversity and global learning, depending on what program that we're talking about. So those are some of the things that are already in place at University of Arizona Global Campus, but I think we can dial them up a little bit, which is what this presentation is about. And I think we can go to the next slide. So that's not me, that is Dr. Bao.
So simply offering and labeling an activity HIP does not necessarily guarantee that students will benefit. 8 characteristics of HIPs have been identified in the literature and can help us identify if the activities that we have implemented in the classroom are HIPs. And I'll give you 3 examples here. An example of interactions with faculty and peers about substantive matters will be activities in which students in a learning community or first-year seminar come together at least once a week. By saying come together, they could come together in a Zoom setting to attend an enrichment event, such as a lecture by a visiting professor or a discussion of common readings and assignments facilitated by their peer mentors or faculty mentors. An example of frequent, timely, and constructive feedback will be a student-faculty project. It could be a research project. It could be a homework assignment project, during which students receive suggestions from the faculty member at various points to discuss progress, next steps, problems encountered, and to receive the quality of students' contributions up to and through the completion of the project. And the last example, periodic structured opportunities to reflect and integrate learning could be linked courses. Linked courses where assignments in one course require students to draw on materials covered in one or more of the linked courses, or a capstone course where students submit a portfolio and explain the contributions of the artifacts contained there that represent the knowledge and proficiencies attained at various points during their program of study. So the exciting part is that HIPs take many different forms, depending on student characteristics, institutional priorities, and contexts. And our job here is to define and implement UAGC HIPs, or bundles of HIP-like elements inside and outside of the classroom, which very likely will be different from how HIPs are implemented in a traditional on-ground university.
Thank you, Mingzhen. The words high impact practices signal the unusually positive benefits that accrue to students who participate in such an educational practice, including enhanced engagement in a variety of educationally purposeful tasks, gains in deep integrative learning, advantageous effects for students from historically underserved populations, and higher persistence and graduation rates. Most of the activities that appear on the Association of American Colleges and Universities, which I like to call AAC&U, HIPS list, are familiar to faculty and staff members, and probably to all of you, as almost all of the HIPs have been available on most campuses in one form or another for decades, as you can see when you look at the slide of the dates of the literature. Multiple studies of the effects of service learning, for example, over the past quarter century yielded empirical evidence on the positive effects on desired outcomes of these courses, which were designed for students to have meaningful community service experiences that are integrated with instruction and require them to apply what they are learning and to reflect on what they have learned and their performance in unscripted situations. Many of you are aware that I started my career with UAGC on the campus in Clinton, Iowa, where there were many opportunities for students to engage in service learning courses and opportunities. So I got to see firsthand some of these benefits. Other HIPs, such as learning communities and internships, long have had enthusiastic champions. Indeed, there was enough evidence in 1999 to persuade the design team that created the first iteration of the National Survey of Student Engagement, affectionately known as the NSSE, to include many of the 11 high impact practices on the questionnaire, asking students in their first and last years of college, did you participate in this activity? In 2006, a systematic analysis of several years of NSSE data showed that students who reported doing one or more of these practices benefited in various ways. In fact, the differences between those who did a HIP and those who did not were so large that the data was reanalyzed to be sure that the results were accurate. The same pattern of results advantaging students participating in HIPs over their peers has subsequently emerged in further analyses. A few years later, Ashley Finley and Tia McNair affirmed that historically underserved students benefited significantly from engaging in HIPs and that participating in multiple HIPs has cumulative accentuating effects. California State University Northridge reported that its Latino students were 10% more likely to earn a baccalaureate degree in 6 years than their counterparts were if they did just one hip. The cumulative effects were also evident for all students. These promising reports and numerous others from individual campuses, along with a growing body of literature and additional research by AAC&U and NESE, really propelled HIPS into something of a national juggernaut. As with many research studies, however, one could argue about the quality of the data or the analytical methods used. A key question emerges when I look at the data. Is the mere availability of HIPS related to institutional graduation and completion rates? There are many reasons why expecting positive findings from such a question are unrealistic. Central among them are that a student's pre-college academic preparation and various demographic and socioeconomic factors account for the largest share of explained variance when predicting completion. A more compelling and actionable approach to determining the value of participating in a HIP is whether the experience is linked to desired outcomes, performance, and behavior, including persistence and graduation, of students who have actually done HIPS compared to those who have not had such an experience. As Ming-Zhen mentioned, implementation quality is critical in terms of realizing the benefits of HIP participation. This is not a surprise. This caveat applies to every effort we make to engage students in meaningful, relevant learning experiences inside and outside the classroom, often on the campus. Research shows the effects of learning communities on engagement, and self-reported gains show great variation between institutions. Institutional context and implementation quality matter. Requiring student participation in one or more HIPs should be an intentional, evidence-based decision and tailored to the institutional context and its students. Simply increasing the number of HIPs is not an effective approach. As institutions of higher education focus more and more of their attention on student success initiatives, as we are, interventions to impact student retention and increase graduation rates, and especially in light of the changes we have made due to the pandemic, we have all been challenged to develop innovative ways to nurture and enhance student success. This requires all of us to put a new spin on these older ideas about HIPs to help us meet the needs of our students. As the literature on the use and effectiveness of HIPs in a range of institutional environments continues to grow, a new area has emerged: HIPs in the context of the online learning environment. It is important to note that the adaptation of HIPs online is a relatively new practice. And as we all know, with any new practice in higher education, it takes some time to build a literature base to discover what is effective for student learning in this context. In the case of transferring HIPs to our online environment and higher online environments in general, the higher education landscape is still very much in the exploration stage. We have been asking and are being asked questions such as, what are the logistics of transitioning a HIP to online? What are the benefits and challenges that emerge? Do HIPs online function in the same ways that they function in face-to-face environments? In what ways do HIPs in the online environment support efforts to advance opportunities for all students? Are HIPs online as effective as they are face-to-face? Are some HIPs more effective online? Are certain HIPs in need of being added to the list that might be more technology focused? The most recent National Institute of Learning Outcomes Assessment, I know that's a mouthful, NILOA, survey of provosts found that hundreds of colleges and universities are working to scale their currently existing HIPs and add others so more students can participate in a HIP. They are also exploring ways to take their HIPs and move them into the online format. We owe it to our students to ensure HIPs and other innovations intended to enhance the quality of education are implemented equitably and with fidelity so that all our students realize their benefits. Thank you.
So why HIPs? And what are we going to do about them? And how are we going to institute them here at our university? So what are HIPs at UAGC? Well, looking at the golden circle from Simon Sinek's work, starting with why, well, what HIPs do for us is help to cultivate some type of meaningful experience for students that enhances their sense of belonging, and they therefore want to be engaged in the curriculum and in the activities in the experience here at our university. And in essence, we reap some concrete improvements in their measurements, whatever measurements we're looking at, whether they're social, whether they're academic, or whatever the case may be. So how do we want to go about this? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to scale them. So they're happening, like I said earlier, in spatterings across the university. So we have to educate ourselves on them, make sure that we're building them and constructing them properly so that they're effective, and then figure out how to scale them so that everyone equitably has access to their benefits, especially the students that need them the most. So one of the ways that we think that should be done is to make sure that we're placing them in positions so that we can increase the participation of at-potential students for that, to take part of those HIPs. And only way that can happen is if we as faculty get engaged in implementing them and putting them in our programs, in our courses, or in our clubs that we lead, so that it's faculty-led, faculty engaged, and therefore has a direct touch on the lives of the students in the life cycle here at the university. So there's constraints. Always, always, always. Whenever there's something great to do, you can expect there's going to be some opposition or some pushback or some kind of mountain that needs to be climbed. So we're going to look at the institutional constraints. What are the roadblocks or barriers institutionally? And then after that, we'll look at them individually, as far as faculty themselves. So first of all, we're an online institution. We're 100% online. We have open enrollment, which means we serve a large number what I like to call at-potential students. So if you see on the slide, the bullet points, the 5 bullet points under students, all of those categories can mean that those students are at potential. So those are the demographics we serve. So we have a large number of at-potential students in our university just by design. And as far as our faculty, we have a fantastic full-time faculty, but greater than 80% of our courses are taught by our associate faculty or adjuncts. So right away, we see some disconnect to what's needed to actually implement and innovate and create HIPs the way that they need to be, established in our culture. And then finally, one of the things institutionally that stands out for us that we need to be aware of is that our courses, especially our undergraduate courses, is where we're targeting HIPs. They're only 5 weeks long. So building relationship, building trust, some of the things that need to take place in order to, let HIPs kind of sink in, if you will, is kind of hindered by that quick timeline. Now, on the next slide, we talk about some of the barriers as far as individuals. So faculty, one of the things that we're up against with HIPs is that they take time. They take time to create, they take time to implement. But the beauty of a HIP is that work that you put in on the front end, man, it speeds up and it makes things so much wonderful, so much more wonderfully after they're in place. So it actually speeds things up at the end, but in the beginning, it's time. So we're already working on 10. So where's the availability? And then how do we get incentives for our associate faculty that, are already on contract and teach, over 80% of our courses? So those are some of the things that we have to keep at the front of our mind as we're, creating these HIPs. But on this slide, I think that the biggest thing that we as a faculty should focus on, it's just me personally, I say this by permission and not by assignment, is that the cultural capital of our at-potential students is often minimized. And that's done a lot of times unintentionally, especially in universities where the vast majority of the population are from, you know, the majority population, not necessarily at potential or low income or wherever the case may be, so that there's a cultural gap in some of the unspoken rules and how students may operate and how instructors may operate. So the expectations or etiquette doesn't always match. So when our at potential students come into our courses, very often the cultural capital, which is their wealth that they bring to the table, gets minimized or dismissed, a lot of times unintentionally. But when that takes place, then the at potential student then feels more disengaged or devalued and kind of steps back away from the table, which is what we don't want, because the hips are the things that will help excel our at potential students into another realm of not just their experience here, but their potential, hence being at potential students. So those are some of the things that I think that we need to keep in the forefront of our minds. So I'm not saying them as a prophet of doom. I'm saying them because, you know, once we know, we can do better. Once we know what the barriers are, we can backwards design and we can create and innovate around them. And I think that's the power of being an educator. That's what we do.
Thank you, Newton. So earlier this summer, a team of folks from UAGC, including Ming-Zhen, Newton, myself, Dr. Iris Lafferty, as well as Dr. Lorraine DeVos, who is the Director of Institutional Effectiveness, participated in the 2021 Institute on High Impact Practices and Student Success, which was sponsored by AAC&U. And this was a really great opportunity for us as a team because we had homework ahead of time, homework during, and homework after. But part of the purpose of this institute was for us to create a plan of how we were going to implement HIPS, determine what that looks like, receive feedback from experts at other institutions where they had effectively implemented high impact practices. And then also we were with a cohort of other institutions teams where we were able to share and present and get feedback on our plans for what we were going to do at our own institutions. When we met with the experts from the other institutions, it was kind of like speed dating because we had like 20 minutes with each expert where they had an opportunity to review our proposal, give us feedback, and we got to ask questions. It was very helpful and very enlightening and engaging and a great opportunity. The other piece was where we presented our proposal and got feedback. And that was also great because it gave us as a team an opportunity to practice our presentation, receive feedback, and also hear what other institutions are doing or planning to do to implement high impact practices and promote student engagement in those HIPs at their own campuses or institutions. We also have been working closely with Dr. George Koo on our plan. And so woven into this slide is a little bit of feedback from the experts, from Dr. Koo, as well as from our cohort universities that we had the opportunity to participate in the Institute with. I'll go through just a few. The first, and this will probably be no surprise to many of you, was we had initially proposed many HIPs and we got feedback from all three areas like, wow, you guys are very ambitious and very eager, and we can tell that you're very passionate about your mission and wanting to help your students, but you have so much in this proposal that rather than doing like being master of one, it's almost like you're jack of all trades. So they really encouraged us to think about where we could have the greatest bang for our buck with our student population so that the HIPs in essence don't collapse and that we're able to be successful, and that whatever we do and start with, we're able to scale and really see an impact in our students. We also recognize the need to find champions within the institution. There might be buckets where there's a great program that can launch, learning from those milestones and accolades, and then scaling those further. Working collectively across departments and ensuring that we're not engaging in these practices in a silo. We talked about building learning communities, but also equally, if not more important, is building a teaching community. And I know that the CEDL team has been and will continue to be very instrumental in the support of this for our faculty and staff. Trust us that we have asked for funding and support, and our academic leadership and our university leadership is very much behind this. It's an important effort and something that really is driven and will continue to be driven by the academic folks. And as Newton mentioned earlier, and we'd like to emphasize again, making sure that we're considering the time that faculty are investing to make certain that the HIPs are implemented effectively for our online students, for the students we serve, and in order to meet the mission of our institution.
Thank you so much, Tricia. So here's the good news. This year, 25% of UFP funding will be allocated to projects aiming to pilot high-impact practices at UAGC. Dr. Pamela Murphy is our CAS fellow, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. Together, we try to achieve 3 goals here. 1, to identify current practices that faculty may already be using or may want to use in their programs to relieve faculty barriers. Give yourself time. Yes, you can budget course release in your proposal for those who have already conducted high impact practices. And also for those who are interested in piloting something but doesn't really have resources or support. Goals number 2, offer funding for the formal testing and piloting of those practices. And finally, to obtain outcome data, impact data to inform the potential extension and implementation beyond the program in which it will be piloted. So your existing practices or plans will serve as the building blocks for the proposed project. You may include one practice or scaffold multiple practices in your courses or at the program level. Describe how they are connected to one HIP or several HIPs, and any early qualitative or quantitative evidence of success that may already exist. It will be very helpful to explain how your proposed project addresses DEI issues and is accessible to all your students, including those at potential students. And also, in addition to the UFP opportunity, the team are finding, as Tricia mentioned, faculty HIP champions. And we will be partnering with CEDL to host a HIP series in 2022, next year, to celebrate the faculty work that is effective and aligned, to help socialize, scale, and form HIPs in teaching practices. And we want to see you in those HIP clips. So finally, I will use retention initiatives at the Academic Engagement Center as an example. It's just an example to wrap up our presentation today. Here, okay, buffet of HIPs. Okay, here's a pop quiz. Who is a buffet goer among the 3 of us? A, Newt, B, Tricia, C, Mingjun. Select all that apply. So like many academic programs, the center faculty and leaders strive for meaningful and engaging learning experiences. Do students complete their courses? Do they progress to the next? Do they actually learn? So we as a team have identified first-year retention initiatives. Step 1 will be to review and prioritize active initiatives, and you can do the same to your program and scaffold holistic hip sequence through schematic mapping. And it helps identify student journey, touch points, and also gaps. So in this case, we offer synchronous weekly welcome sessions in the first class, ASH 101. It's the same as BIS 105. Embedded orientation and CHAMPS peer mentoring program in courses 1 and 2. We share monthly new student reports, those who successfully complete course 1, to help connect students with their programs of study. Live learning in first-year courses, including entry point program courses at both graduate and undergraduate levels. In course 3, Yvonne, Barb, and then the rest of the learning community work group are piloting virtual learning community with the UMA transfer students with a goal to expand virtual learning community to all first-year students at the program level. Writing intensive courses are placed in courses 4 and 8. During the second half of the first year, Newt and I are in the process of designing weekly synchronous first-year seminars to connect students to program faculty and their areas of expertise. Students are invited to organizations and clubs, first as participants, later as leaders, to publish their academic work. And finally, they take the Gen Ed capstone course to assess their mastery of core competencies that are aligned with the institutional learning outcomes. So again, this is just first year example. You don't have to load your buffet plate, but it will be very helpful to revisit your program retention initiatives and see if they actually build on top of each other. So thank you all. Newt and Tricia, do you have anything else to add? Okay, so we would love to hear from you any practices that you have found to be effective or those that you would like to try out. If you have any questions about HIPS, we will be more than happy to find answers together. Thank you.
So I see in the chat that Jennifer said that she's implementing live learning in Gen 103 as well. So I think actually that some of us might be implementing HIPS in some degree and not necessarily knowing that we have that we are. So we kind of encourage you to go out and to research HIPS. You know, if you want to contact us, we can give you a couple of resources. We're actually in the process of building a bank of resources. We're calling them HIP clips, where we'll give you little short 5-minute videos to talk a little bit more about each of the 11 categories to kind of jumpstart your thinking so you can see how you can implement them in your course design, your program modifications, you know, or any of the things that you're doing with students to help them be more successful. So I just think it's a powerful thing, not something to kind of like look at lightly, like, yeah, we're supposed to do that. But I mean, if we get intentional with, you know, implementing HIPS as they exist in the culture of our students, I'm almost certain we're going to see some jumps in retention, persistence, and just the overall quality of the experience that students have when they walk away from UAGC.
Well said, Newton. Thank you.
Thank you, Newt.
I'm kind of looking at so Allison is asking, can we share the slides, Ming-Zhen?
Yes, we will be sharing slides. Haley can help us with that after the meeting.
Yes, I believe the recording will be available. Will it be? Well, if it's available for associate faculty as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Someone, Bonita is asking, how can the CETL support your efforts with this exciting HIPS initiative? So I think we already kind of started that process, working with them. I don't know, Tricia might be able to speak a little bit more in detail than me.
Yes, so we met with Morgan and many representatives from CETL to talk through some plans, creating the HIPS clips, making sure that we're scaling in a mindful and deliberate manner. And as you know, that you all on the CEDL team create such professional and engaging work. So it's definitely a team effort. And that's something that was feedback we received and that we recognize in order to be successful. Also tapping into some of the expertise of student services and some of those folks. So it's definitely a large scale effort, but Benita, definitely connect with your leaders to see kind of what's already in the queue to move forward. And we're excited for the partnership and recognize that this is going to be a large scale effort that everyone will be a part of. And Lynn Trevisan, to your point, we will definitely need associate faculty to be our champions and cheerleaders for this as well.
Yeah. I got one more thing to say. So I don't know if you can see that. This is one of the books they recommended
Yes.
when we were in the course this summer. So I did pick it up and I have been reading it like piece and piece and little by little. And it is some amazing stuff in there. And one of the things that I learned right away is that we don't have to implement HIPS in a silo. So if you're a program lead or whatever the case may be, for instance, common intellectual experiences or learning communities, some of those things like that, or even some of the collaborative projects, you can do them across program and across courses. As a matter of fact, learning communities is defined by working across courses, more than one course. So HIPS can be done in teams, they can be done in partnerships. It's an amazing thing to do. So the book is High Impact Practices in Online Education, High Impact Practices in Online. Thank you, Tricia. I saw you looking, that's what you're doing. So she put the link up there for you. Looks like this. We actually sat in a couple of sessions with some of the authors of this book. Ming Zhen was wonderful enough to get us appointments with them. So I recommend you grab it and start reading and let those brain juices start turning around, because I think we're on the verge right now at UAGC in our culture to be innovative and creative and do something different than we've ever done before. And I think HIPS is a good start.
Yes, and I saw James' question here. So talking about, and also going back to Bonita's question, talking about CEDL partnership, it's really a close connection between academic programs, faculty, and the CEDL coach consultant. So as Newt mentioned, we want to make it a thoughtful planning process. So from the program perspective, if you have any retention initiatives or HIP-like elements that you would like CEDL coach and consultants to observe in your classroom, please connect, and then they will do more targeted observations in the classroom to get associate faculty members involved in this entire HIP process as well.
Lynn, I see your comment about the book, and I think that Dr. Lafferty is part of the conversation, but if not, we'll definitely double back to her and see what we can do about getting access more broadly for faculty to this textbook. It's a great one.
Yeah, we can only ask, right?
Can only funding.
I see Dan says, so we are at potential re-HIPS.
And Stephanie, to your point about compensating associate faculty, we talked about a lot of different types of compensation beyond payment or certificates or professional development opportunities. So I think there's more to come with what that will look like, for lack of a better way to say it, but definitely since they touch the majority of our students, we definitely need to consider the work that they do and will need to do in order to ensure that this process and that the initiatives roll out effectively and have the intended benefit for our students.
Right.
Great question.
Right. And I think it's important just from a faculty standpoint, and a course designer and those things of sort that we do as lead faculty, it's important to learn about the hips and then to kind of I want to say chew on them for a while and digest them to see how can I integrate it into my program so that it's a living part. It's part of the molecule and not something extra. It's in the nucleus. It's not an electron flying around on the outside. So if you can figure out how to do that, that will save some of the time and answer some of the questions as far as availability and just demand on not just your time, but your associate faculty's time as well. And again, think about it across programs.
Yes.
If you have related programs, like for instance, I know in our department, there's a related program to Ed Studies, and there's one in ECE, early childhood, that we could work very well together to create a HIP that does a collaborative project or a common intellectual experience or something like that. And dividing that up that way, takes the work off of someone's shoulders and spreads it out evenly. So, we may not even be extra time, just a different way of approaching the course.
Newton, that's a great point, and something that when we met with George Koo, he said, you don't want to have it in one place and then never give the students that great experience ever again throughout the program. So I love what you mentioned, Newton, about sharing across programs. Even sharing within a program across courses, I think, is an extremely valuable exercise to get your students through your program and across the finish line to graduation.
Yes, absolutely. And also, HIPs may sound new to many of us, but really it's a faculty affirmation. We have already been doing those, maybe just not in the HIP language. So this is more about revisit and then think more thoughtfully about what we do and then how we can do it more intentionally and with a clear goal at the end. So kudos to everyone. And Stephanie, I'm not sure if you consider UFP funds as a compensation to associate faculty members, but for the UFP opportunity, the PI needs to be a full-time faculty member here, but the PI is encouraged to work with associate faculty members and staff here at the UAGC to pilot and experiment or even scale any of the HIPs that you guys have been doing in the programs.
Great, everyone. It looks like we have addressed all the questions in our chat. I am also going to post our follow-up survey link, the link to the certificate of attendance, and the link to the CETL event calendar. We hope that you will join us for future events. Thank you to Ming-Zhen, Newton, and Tricia for sharing this engaging presentation with us today. We look forward to continuing this conversation about HIPs. And just one last reminder that we ask all participants to complete the follow-up survey, and the survey and recording will be emailed directly to all participants and posted to the CETL site. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.